You can't do that. Yeah. And so Mervyn said, Gail, I don't want you to play an ugly witch. And I said, Mervyn, I won't play an ugly witch.
Hollywood in its golden years was a dream machine, churning out stars, stories, and legends. But beneath the glitz and glamour was a system that could lift you up one day and shut you out the next. Some of the brightest stars of the time found themselves on the wrong side of that system.
Louis, have your man go with Mr. Laszlo and take care of his luggage.
Certainly, Rick. Anything you say. Find Mr. Laszlo's luggage and put it on the plane.
Yes, sir. This way, please.
Whether it was politics, personal struggles, or daring to step outside the lines, their rising careers came to a sudden and painful stop. They had the talent. They had the fame. But in a world that demanded perfection, they paid the price for being human. These are 21 vintage stars who were banned or blacklisted, and the surprising, sometimes heartbreaking reasons behind their fall from grace. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin was one of the most iconic figures in silent film, known around the world for his little tramp character. But behind the mustache and the slapstick comedy, Chaplin faced serious trouble that eventually led to him being banned from the United States. His fall from grace wasn't because of his acting. It was about politics, personal scandal, and the fear of his growing influence. During the 1940s, Chaplin's personal life started drawing heavy criticism. He had relationships with much younger women, some of whom were teenagers. One of those cases led to a highly publicized paternity suit that damaged his reputation. But what really caused the government to turn against him was his political stance. Chaplin was openly left-leaning, and during the Cold War era, that was enough to make him a target. As McCarthyism swept through Hollywood, Chaplin was labeled as un-American. In 1952, while traveling to England for a film premiere, the US government revoked his re-entry permit. Without a trial or official charges, he was effectively exiled. Chaplin eventually settled in Switzerland and didn't return to America for 2 decades. Hattie McDaniel. Hattie McDaniel made history in 1940 when she became the first black actor to win an Academy Award for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind. It was a moment of pride, but also controversy. While she broke barriers, her career was marked by criticism from both white Hollywood elites and black activists who believed she was reinforcing harmful stereotypes. In the years that followed, the very role that brought her fame became the reason Hollywood began to shut her out. Dot McDaniel was often typecast as a maid, cook, or servant roles that reflected the limited opportunities for black performers at the time. She once famously said, "I'd rather play a maid than be one," a statement that was both honest and misunderstood. Activists from the NAACP criticized her for accepting such roles, while studios became hesitant to cast her in anything else. As America began to shift culturally in the late 1940s, McDaniel's screen presence started to disappear behind the scenes. She was fighting health issues and racism. When she tried to pivot to radio, she faced more backlash and restrictions. Eventually, she was blacklisted from the kind of work she had once dominated. Hattie McDaniel's career ended by the complicated politics of race and image. She opened doors for others, but paid the price for walking through them first. Louise Rayner. Louise Rayner was once the golden girl of MGM. She made history as the first actor to win back-to-back Oscars, claiming Best Actress in 1936 for The Great Ziegfeld, and again in 1937 for The Good Earth. But almost as quickly as she rose, Rayner vanished from the spotlight. Rayner was never interested in being a glamorous starlet. She saw acting as an art, not a business. But MGM wanted her to play charming, shallow roles, while she longed for complex, meaningful characters. When she refused to play along, studio head Louis B. Mayer grew frustrated with her. He saw her independence as difficult, and then her career began to suffer. The studio gave her fewer and fewer parts. By the early 1940s, she was practically blacklisted, quietly ignored. Rayner later said that winning 2 Oscars so quickly was a curse. She left Hollywood and moved to Europe, walking away from the fame most actors would die for. Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson was one of the most powerful and inspiring voices of the 20th century. A gifted actor, singer, and activist, he broke barriers for black performers in a deeply racist industry. But his rebellious spirit was exactly why Hollywood turned against him. Robeson used his fame to speak out against injustice. He challenged segregation in the entertainment industry, criticized colonialism, and openly supported workers' rights at a time when many black performers were expected to stay quiet and grateful. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, during the height of McCarthyism, Robeson's political beliefs made him a target. He supported leftist causes and expressed admiration for the Soviet Union's fight against racism, so the US government labeled him a communist sympathizer. He was blacklisted, his passport was revoked, and he was banned from traveling abroad to perform. Hollywood distanced itself from him completely. He went from starring roles in sold-out concerts to barely being able to book a stage. Lena Horne. Lena Horne was a stunning singer and actress whose beauty and voice made her a trailblazer in Hollywood. She was one of the first black women to sign a long-term studio contract, but behind her smile and glamour was a constant battle against racism and typecasting. Lena refused to take roles that degraded black people. She turned down parts where she'd have to play a maid or speak in broken English, even if it meant fewer opportunities. Her refusal to play stereotypes made her stand out, but it also made her a problem in the eyes of studio bosses. In many of her films, Lena was given solo musical numbers that could be easily edited out when movies were shown in the South. She was never allowed to be the romantic lead or share the screen closely with white actors. Hollywood praised her talent, but kept her at arm's length. Her activism only made things harder. Lena spoke out against segregation and marched for civil rights. She visited soldiers during World War II, but was heartbroken to see black servicemen pushed to the back of the audience during her shows. She called out racism in America, while still trying to survive in an industry that didn't want her to be too loud. Over time, Hollywood stopped casting her. Studios didn't want a woman who spoke her mind and demanded respect. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer arrived in Hollywood in the 1930s after gaining attention for her provocative essay, God Dies. At just 22, she was labeled wild and difficult, simply for being outspoken and independent. Unlike other starlets, Frances rejected the glamour and conformity of the studio system. She refused shallow roles and resisted the industry's expectations, leading the media to brand her unstable and studios to call her uncooperative. In 1942, after an altercation in a hotel lobby, she was arrested, and what followed was devastating. Frances spent years in psychiatric institutions where reports described forced injecting, restraints, shock treatments, and abuse. She later wrote of feeling like she had died and returned empty. After nearly a decade in and out of institutions, she was released to find Hollywood had moved in. She wasn't officially blacklisted, just quietly forgotten, dismissed as mad. John Garfield. John Garfield was one of the most compelling actors of the 1940s. Known for his raw, natural presence, he stood apart from the polished image of traditional leading men. His performances felt authentic, and that made him unforgettable. But Garfield's career didn't fade due to talent. It was cut short by politics. During the Cold War, Hollywood was swept by fear and suspicion. The House Un-American Activities Committee, a HUAC, began investigating industry figures for alleged ties to communism. Refusing to name others could mean the end of a career. Garfield had supported certain causes later viewed as leftist, but he denied being a communist. When called before HUAC, he refused to name anyone. That choice cost him everything. After his testimony, studios stopped offering him roles. He turned to Broadway, hoping for a fresh start, but the strain, both emotional and physical, took a toll. Plagued by heart problems, Garfield died of a heart attack in 1952. He was just 39. Gail Sondergaard. Gail Sondergaard was a rising Hollywood star, winning an Academy Award for her debut in Anthony Adverse, and earning acclaim for portraying strong, mysterious women. But her promising career came to a halt when she refused to betray her husband. In the late 1940s, her husband, screenwriter Herbert Biberman, was named one of the Hollywood 10 filmmakers accused of communist ties who refused to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. Gail stood by him and also refused to cooperate. As a result, she was blacklisted. Studios stopped calling, roles vanished, and friends distanced themselves. She and Bieberman were monitored and labeled as threats. For more than a decade, Gail couldn't find work in film, performing only in small theater productions. By the time the blacklist lifted, her momentum was gone. She returned to acting in the 1960s, but never regained her former success. Zero Mostel. Zero Mostel was one of Broadway's brightest stars. He became famous for roles like Tevier and Fiddler on the Roof. Mostel had a big personality, sharp wit, and a voice that could fill any room. But during the height of McCarthyism, being bold and outspoken came at a cost. In the early 1950s, Mostel was called to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. They believed he had ties to communism and wanted him to name names. He refused and didn't give in or betray friends or colleagues. Instead, he made jokes, mocked the hearings, and stood his ground. Hollywood blacklisted him immediately. Studios labeled him uncooperative, and producers were warned not to hire him. For a while, he relied on art and teaching to get by. Slowly, Broadway began to welcome him back, and he rebuilt his life on the stage, far away from the cameras that had once chased him. Howard Da Silva. Howard Da Silva was a respected actor with a powerful voice and commanding presence. But his career came to a halt when he was blacklisted during the Red Scare. He started on Broadway and quickly moved into film, playing tough, memorable roles in movies like The Lost Weekend and They Live by Night. Directors praised his range, and audiences loved the intensity he brought to the screen. But in 1951, everything changed when Howard Da Silva was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee. He had been politically active, supporting progressive causes and labor rights, things that, at the time, were enough to make someone a suspect. When asked to testify, Da Silva didn't give names or accuse anyone, and right after the hearings, his film and television offers vanished. He was removed from projects he'd already started, and studios stopped calling. Even when he was hired, his name was taken out of the credits. He was banned in every way that counted. For more than a decade, Howard Da Silva was forced to rely on stage work and smaller gigs to get by. He eventually returned to film in the 1960s, but the years of silence had left a gap that couldn't be filled. Jeff Corey. Jeff Corey was a respected character actor in the 1940s, known for his steady presence, natural talent, and quiet grit. Directors valued his reliability and skill, and he built a solid career in film. But in 1951, at the height of McCarthy-era suspicion, that career came to a halt. Subpoenaed by the House Un-American Activities Committee, Jeff was asked to name colleagues suspected of communist ties. He refused to cooperate, choosing not to lie and not to betray anyone. That decision cost him everything. Hollywood turned its back on him. Studios dropped him, auditions vanished, and casting directors were told to steer clear. For over a decade, he was blacklisted. He survived by teaching acting and working in small theater productions, far from the career he had built. In the late 1960s and 70s, Jeff slowly returned to film and television, again proving his range and dedication. But the years lost to the blacklist were never fully recovered. Lionel Stander. Lionel Stander was a gifted actor known for his deep voice, sharp wit, and commanding screen presence. In the 1930s and 1940s, he built a steady career playing tough, humorous roles alongside stars like Barbara Stanwyck and Gary Cooper. Off-dash. Screen Stander was outspoken. He supported labor rights and held left-leaning political views, stances that drew the attention of the House Un-American Activities Committee during the height of the Red Scare. In 1951, he was called to testify. Unlike many, he didn't back down. He openly challenged the committee's methods and refused to name names. That defiance effectively ended his career. Though never formally charged, Stander was unofficially blacklisted. Studios stopped hiring him, and casting directors were told to avoid him. For years, his name disappeared from film credits. He moved to New York, where he found limited work in theater and voice acting, but Hollywood remained out of reach. It wasn't until the 1970s, over 2 decades later, that he returned to screen work, notably with a role in Heart to Heart. By then, much of his prime film career had passed him by. Marsha Hunt. Marsha Hunt was a rising star in Hollywood, known for her beauty, intelligence, and versatility. By the late 1930s, she had appeared in over 20 films, earning respect for her ability to portray a wide range of characters from ingenues to strong, independent women. Her elegance and thoughtful presence made her a favorite among directors. In 1947, Marsha joined a group of actors, including Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, who traveled to Washington to protest the actions of the House Un-American Activities Committee. She wasn't politically radical, nor a communist. She simply believed in free speech, due process, and standing up for fellow artists. That decision came at a cost. In 1950, her name appeared in Red Channels, a publication that listed entertainers accused of communist sympathies. Though she had done nothing illegal, she was blacklisted for speaking out, and her once promising career stalled. Marsha did not retreat from public life. Instead, she shifted her focus to humanitarian work, advocating for causes like world hunger, homelessness, and civil rights. While she continued to work occasionally in film and television, the trajectory of her acting career was never fully restored. Will Geer. Will Geer was a talented character actor known for his warm presence and steady voice, appearing in dozens of films throughout the 1930s and 40s. But off-screen, he was a committed activist, supporting labor unions and speaking out for workers' rights, which soon made him a target. In 1951, during the height of the Red Scare, Geer was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee. He refused to give names or cooperate. The result was swift. He was blacklisted from film, radio, and television. With no work and 3 children to support, he was effectively shut out of the industry. Forced to leave Hollywood, Geer co-founded the Theatricum Botanicum in Topanga Canyon, performing on stage, growing food, and teaching to make ends meet. It wasn't until the 1970s that he returned to mainstream television, winning hearts as Grandpa Walton's on The Waltons. Though Geer found his way back, the prime of his screen career had already passed. Dalton Trumbo. Dalton Trumbo was one of Hollywood's most gifted screenwriters. By the 1940s, Trumbo was at the top of his game. He had written hits like Kitty Foyle and 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, and was one of the highest paid screenwriters in the industry. But during the Cold War, success didn't protect him. In 1947, Trumbo was called to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. Along with 9 other screenwriters and directors known as the Hollywood 10, he refused to answer their questions. He didn't deny his political beliefs, and he also didn't apologize for them. That defiance sent him to jail for almost a year. When he got out, Hollywood had already erased him. He couldn't get work under his own name. So he started writing under fake names and still won awards. He secretly wrote Roman Holiday and The Brave One, both of which won Academy Awards. Philip Loeb. Philip Loeb was a beloved actor and a central figure on The Goldbergs, one of television's first hit sitcoms. But in 1950, when Red Channels listed his name among those accused of communist sympathies, everything changed, without trial, proof, or explanation. Though never charged with any crime, Loeb came under fire. Nervous sponsors pressured CBS, and despite creator Gertrude Berg's efforts to keep him, the network demanded his removal. He was forced off the show he helped build. Loeb was blacklisted, unable to find work on stage or screen. As a single father caring for a mentally ill son, the loss was devastating, not just professionally, but personally. With no income and no path forward, the weight became unbearable. In 1955, he took his own life in a Manhattan hotel. He was 6'4". Philip Loeb wasn't silenced for wrongdoing, but for fear that gripped an industry too afraid to speak up. His is one of the most tragic stories of the blacklist, a man stripped not just of his career, but of his dignity and hope. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was one of the biggest stars of the silent film era. In the 1910s and early 1920s, he was a beloved comedic actor, director, and writer who played a key role in launching the careers of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. At his peak, he was among the highest paid actors in the world. That success came to a sudden end in 1921 when Arbuckle hosted a party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. During the event, a young actress, Virginia Rappe, fell ill, and later died. The media seized on the story, and despite a lack of solid evidence, Arbuckle was accused of assault and manslaughter. He was arrested and tried 3 times. The first 2 trials ended in hung juries. The third resulted in a full acquittal, with the jury issuing a rare written apology, stating that he had been wrongfully accused, still comma. The damage to his reputation was irreversible. Under pressure from the public and morality groups, Hollywood banned him from appearing on screen, and his films were pulled from circulation. Though he attempted a quiet return to the industry as a director under a pseudonym, his acting career never recovered. Arbuckle spent the remainder of his life trying to restore his name, not through legal battles, but in the court of public opinion. Lillian Hellman. Lillian Hellman was one of the most gifted and respected writers of her time. By the 1940s, she'd already established herself as a formidable voice in American theater and film. Her plays, The Children's Hour, The Little Foxes, and Watch on the Rhine were both critically acclaimed and commercially successful. Hellman wrote with conviction, often creating sharp, emotionally layered female characters that challenged the norms of the era. She was not just a writer, but a bold truth-teller in an industry that often favored comfort over confrontation. That courage, however, would come at a cost. In 1952, at the height of the Red Scare, Hellman was called to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. Like many artists of the time, she was pressured to name others suspected of communist affiliations. But Hellman refused. Instead, she submitted a letter to the committee that became legendary, stating, "I cannot and will not cut my conscience to fit this year's fashions." It was a powerful stand, but a costly one. Immediately after, she was blacklisted. Studios distanced themselves, screenwriting offers disappeared, and her career in Hollywood came to a sudden halt. There was no trial, no formal charge, only the accusation and the stigma that followed. Despite her accomplishments and the enduring impact of her work, Hellman was now viewed as a threat in an industry consumed by fear. Herbert Biberman. Herbert Biberman was a talented screenwriter and director whose career showed great promise in the 1940s. He worked with major studios and appeared to be on a steady path to success. But in 1947, that trajectory changed when he was named one of the Hollywood 10, a group of filmmakers accused of communist affiliations during the height of the Red Scare, called to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. Biberman refused to answer questions about his political beliefs or name colleagues. He viewed the proceedings as unconstitutional and chose to stand by his principles. For that decision, he was convicted of contempt of Congress, sentenced to 6 months in prison, and blacklisted from the industry. After serving his sentence, Biberman attempted to resume his career, but no studio would hire him. Effectively shut out of Hollywood, he turned to independent filmmaking. In 1954, he wrote and directed Salt of the Earth, a film based on a real miners' strike that focused on labor rights and social justice. The film faced intense backlash. It was banned in the US, labeled as communist propaganda, and theaters were discouraged from screening it. Even the cast and crew were harassed. Biberman. Lar Parks. Larry Parks was a rising star in the 1940s, gaining widespread acclaim for his portrayal of Al Jolson in The Jolson Story, 1946. The performance earned him an Academy Award nomination and positioned him as one of Columbia Pictures' most promising leading men. With talent, charm, and momentum, Parks seemed destined for a long and successful career. That changed in 1951, when he was called to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. Parks initially pleaded not to testify, deeply conflicted about naming others, but under immense pressure and with a family to support, he ultimately complied and named colleagues, some of whom were close friends. His cooperation, however, did not protect him. Despite testifying, Columbia Pictures canceled his contract and other studios followed. Parks was blacklisted, not because he refused to testify, but because of past associations with leftist politics. In the end, he lost both his reputation and his career. In the years that followed, acting opportunities dwindled. Parks took on occasional low-budget roles before stepping away from the industry entirely. Alongside his wife, actress Betty Garrett, who also felt the effects of the blacklist, he started a furniture business to make a living. Larry Parks died in 1975 at the age of 60. Alva Bessie. Alva Bessie may not have been a Hollywood celebrity, but within industry circles, he was deeply respected. A gifted screenwriter, novelist, and former war correspondent during the Spanish Civil War, Bessie brought a fierce intellect and moral clarity to his work. But in the late 1940s, his convictions would cost him everything. In 1947, Bessie became one of the Hollywood 10. Bessie did not deny his political beliefs, and he refused to name others. For his stance, he was convicted of contempt of Congress, sentenced to 10 months in prison, and blacklisted from Hollywood. Which of these stars shocked you the most? Do you think the industry was too harsh? Or were some of these bans justified? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss more untold Hollywood stories. Thanks for watching.